6:30. Good evening, everyone. Oops, my mic is a little loose. Welcome to the City Council regular meeting. I am calling this meeting to order. The time is now 6:30 p.m. Please stand and join me for the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Madam Clerk, will you please take roll call?
Councilmember Gama,
Here.
Councilmember Hernandez,
Here.
Councilmember Martinez,
Present.
Mayor Perez,
Here.
and please let the record reflect that Mayor Pro Tem McQueen-Lejeune is absent.
Thank you. Tonight's inspiration will be given by Councilmember Gama.
Thank you. There's so much to be inspired from and with in our community. I have a long list of things to talk about, so hopefully I could just go real quick and everybody will be inspired. So, it's May time. May is the time for graduation. So many high school students are getting ready to graduate. What an exciting time. I can remember back when I was a high school student graduating. It seems like yesterday. And so you get to live and you see the excitement, the joy that these young persons are going to be going for in their future life goals. Hueneme Little League just finished their season, and it was a little trying season because their ball fields are under construction, but they finished with smiles and they had a great season, and they stepped up and had to be a little bit uncomfortable, but man, they really enjoyed themselves. Last night, Real Guppies is making an impact across Ventura County, and we saw that in their fundraising event for the surf and turf thing. Mayor Perez was there, as with many, many supporters. Becky was there, and we had a great time supporting a great group. These walls are filled with inspiration, and they're artists, and they're 7th and 8th graders, and they're from Hueneme Elementary. So if you get a time, look around and just enjoy the artwork. And if you don't enjoy life, well, you better start, because we live in an amazing place. And each and every day, we should count our blessings as we go through this wonderful city of ours, and the ocean and the beach life and all that. And then there's George Mahognan. 10 months ago, he contacted myself and Sharon Claris, and he said, I want to put on an event for senior citizens at the Ocean View Pavilion. And he's been doing it now for 10 months. I think we did the 10th one this last Saturday night, and it was themed a prom, second chance prom. And if you haven't been, and if you're over 55, please come and check it out. It is so great to see all the senior citizens of our community dancing. And George does this out of his own pocket, out of the generosity of his heart, to provide for our community seniors a place where they could come and dance and smile and get to know new people. And this past weekend's event was catered by our chief of police. He makes some baked ziti, Caesar salad, and Hueneme Bakehouse provided some garlic bread. And it was just wonderful to see our chief and his support staff come out and do that. So you don't have to look far here in Hueneme to be inspired. And of course, a lot of us live here because of the beach. And I got this calendar from a meeting now. It's a Tide calendar, and I just want to read the back of it to close this out. To be aware of one's environment is to be aware of oneself. By living near and using the ocean, we stay in touch with a pure source of life. The curving lines on these pages actually represent interaction between our moon, sun, and the planets traveling through eternal space. While the flow of the tides is endless, we spend but a few short moments of influence on this earth. For many reasons, this time in history seems most critical. We have the power to destroy or preserve our ocean environment. The responsibility of its preservation is in the hands of we who use and enjoy the ocean. These are but words, while actions alone create results. There are many ways to help with preservation. Please take the time to find and use them. So respect your environment, enjoy each and every day, and thank God you live in the city of Port Hueneme. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Gama. We will now move on to public comments. We will hear public comments not pertaining to items on the agenda. Comments are limited to 3 minutes. This process will be the same for comments pertaining to each agenda item. Madam Clerk, do we have any public comments?
We do. First up is Becky Bruning, followed by Tom King.
Good evening, Mayor, council members, staff, and audience. I'm here with Real Guppy Outdoors. We did have a fantastic night last night, raised a lot of money, and this Sunday is our family fish day out at the end of Hueneme Pier from 8:30 to 11:30. So come out and join us and have some fun.
Thank you.
I'm Mayor Perez, City Council members, staff, audience, neighbors. I'm just here to give a quick update. When I first stood before you on the matter of the petition to oppose the location of the Bard Monument at Surfside and Market Street at the Flag Plaza, I had about 40 signatures, then it became 80. Now it's over 150. I know the port from time to time indicates, well, maybe they're not so solidly hard in terms of having that as their location, but it's important, I think, to at least indicate that it's not one person up here right now, it's about 152 people. So I thank you for listening. Really, we're trying to encourage you to acknowledge that that's the wrong location for that monument. So thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Randall Thomas, and then Jan Burke.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Council, City staff, neighbors, and community members. I'm here to talk about the Community Benefit Fund and kind of what our neighbors have kind of come up with so that way we can kind of have a path forward so that we can all see everything aligned and united. The way that the current process involves the community fund can be a little confusing. We're just looking for a standard operating procedure that's more aligned upon how things specifically go and get approved. And some ideas we have was an establishment of an advisory committee of Hueneme residents to help create the new structure and process for an updated Hueneme Community Benefit Fund program. We suggest that each council member appoint one advisory committee member. The committee would then meet on an agreed upon schedule on a regular basis to select projects for funding. And then these projects would then be presented to council for final approval to bring to the Hueneme Community Benefit Fund meeting with the port. Second thing would be this new structure would be more aligned with a grant process where funds are processed and distributed to local nonprofits and community-based programs that apply for the fund with the focus and goal to enhance the quality of life in the Port Hueneme community. Third would be encouraging matching funds for projects from local businesses, organizations, and residents who would love to provide better and greater benefit to the overall community fund. To increase that dollar amount, it encourages community involvement and increases pride in our city. I know a lot of people would probably like to see that community benefit fund baseline number increase, and I think having the community also contribute to that would do really well for our city to show everyone here that we're a united city and we want to make this place an even better place to live than it already is. And the fourth thing would be having this grant application process that assures that approved programs are substantial projects that produce quantifiable outcomes for the community. And a few things that we kind of came up with was senior and youth programs, safety, police canines, coastal programs, and environmental projects such as charging stations, solar and lighting projects, and other things of the sort. City beautification projects as well, such as murals and landscaping. Upgrades to artwork and whatnot would also be a substantial benefit to the community. This was also brought to the Port Commission meeting that I attended earlier today. And one of the Port Commissioners mentioned what's beneficial to both organizations or agencies. And I would like to know kind of what that settlement states specifically to what benefits an agency or a community. So I'm not sure who I need to get in contact with to be able to see what that settlement agreement states, but if I could get in contact with somebody, that would be great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I can just note real quick, so we will contact you to let you know how to get that information.
Mr. Lamont Hayes, you'll be after Ms. Burke. No. Ms. Burke, go ahead. I was letting him know you.
Thank you, Randall. Good evening, council, staff, neighbors, and our officers. My goodness, there's a bunch of them today. I appreciate what Randall has said. This was a synopsis of what our HOA coalition put together. I handed out to you sort of a summary that we came up with. We were very concerned with the last joint meeting between the council and the port, and we did present this just today, this afternoon, to the port. And I think we came away a bit more confused because there seems to be pushback and concerns about what the intent of these funds are for. And we would like to get some better clarity on what the agreement is about, because one of the commissioners said, and I quote, that this agreement was made in 2015 as a settlement, and it was a settlement between the port and the city to create a fund that would benefit the city and the port organizations. Not the community, but the city and the port organizations. And that was a little startling to me because it's called a community benefit fund, right? So it's a little contradictory to where our interpretation or our perception is. And we've been watching this process, and it's been a little cumbersome. And I think that we feel that we'd like to create some structure to it so where it's clear to the public what it's for, and it's clear that it's a community benefit fund or not. And because it's very interesting, even today in some of the topics and subjects that came up, there was a soccer team that wanted to get some funds, and they wanted to get some funds for a trip because they won the Southern California soccer. And somebody asked, is this a community benefit fund funding? And the commission said no. So what is it for? And I think this is where, that's a great example of a good community benefit, right? So I guess I would like to get clarity. And I think that if it's Hueneme specific, it seems to me it should be, because it was part of the Hueneme settlement between the port and the city. Then let's get that clear, and so it's not a lot of random and small onesie-twosies, and let's do something that's meaningful and impactful to our community. That's what the coalition really would like to see. That we want to help. And so I just leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, council, staff, members of the public, to the chief, Federico, and to the officers here. Good evening. My name is Lamont Hayes. I represent the Ventura County Resource Center. Started a nonprofit organization to help the community. We're having a resource fair on June 1st from 10 to 2 at the Boys and Girls Club of Greater Oxnard and Port Hueneme, 1900 West 5th Street in the city of Oxnard. This event is to gear everyone together and hear about the resources that our county represents and have. So you have all the different organizations, nonprofits, the health department, the Ventura County Health Department will be there, public health will be there, different departments that usually don't go to community events are coming. We worked out something with them, so you'll hear more about a lot of the resources that they have. The district attorney's office, we have BMX coming, that's gonna bring their bikes up as well as ramps to show some skills, which I invited BMX up to kind of talk to the Oxnard Fixie crew, to talk to them about safety and to really impact them as well. Talk with the Highway Patrol, California Highway Patrol was bringing their rodeo until Oxnard decided they wanted to host a rave on the same day. So we have the Oxnard PD is gonna come with their motorcycles and try to do some education as well. On that day, we have bikes that were donated. We have several bikes with helmets and gear, skateboards. The event is gonna be audible. They're gonna have speakers throughout the space. A lot of times when you go to large events, you don't get to go and talk and speak to all the vendors there. So there's gonna be speakers throughout. So anybody up on the stage talking about their resources will be able to be heard. The vendors that are sitting there will be able to be heard. So anyone that here in the council or any of the members of the public, please come out, support your county, as well as all the resources and funding. There's a lot of money here in Ventura County that we don't receive or know of. So homeless assistance, there's agencies that's there. If you're short on your rent, they're giving $1,500 to help you with your cars, your rent. There's agencies, I've sent people over there. There's also Oxnard College that's helping. So that's gonna be June 1st, 10 to 2 at the Boys and Girls Club, 1900 West 5th Street in the city of Oxnard. Follow the signs. I'm gonna put some out. Thank you.
And then we have 2 written public comments. City Council, during the last council meeting on May 6th, the following statement was made from the dais at the beginning of the flag policy agenda item. I'm very happy to see that the pride flag is now part of our policy and that we will be raising the pride flag every June of every year from here on out until the policy changes, and hopefully it doesn't. The problem with this statement is not its content, but rather that it was made before public comments were heard, before any public deliberation, and before a public vote had been taken. Based on that, it appeared to viewers that adoption of the flag policy resolution had already been determined prior to the meeting. As you know, an open, transparent government process is not optional. It is required by the Brown Act. The public has the right to speak and to be heard on issues coming before the City Council. If a resident takes the time to provide input to council on an agenda item, they should be heard before a decision is made and announced, not after. As for the new flag policy itself, hopefully a future city council will see the wisdom in representing all of Port Huenemi's diverse residents equally under all-inclusive city flag. Thank you, and happy Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. Jeffrey Scarberry. Dear City Council members, it is with desperation that I beg you to address the ongoing issues with Miranda Park, specifically the corner of the overflow lot bordering the residential area on Beachport Drive. This area is a hotspot for loitering dawn to dusk, drug use, drinking, loud music, mobile mechanic work, littering, sexual activity, defecation, and urination. These issues include, but are nowhere near limited to, litter being thrown or blowing all over the wall, the ongoing stench of human excrement, noise, nuisance, and even once a crack pipe being thrown over the wall, shattering only feet away from a resident's special needs child. People have even jumped the wall to come vandalize personal property. Our fine officers do what they can and have admittedly increased patrols, but without action, patrols do not deter this behavior. The other day, a complaint was made about obvious loud mechanic work in the park, and PHPD, although responding quickly, drove right past without doing anything. Without proper enforcement as a clear message that these actions will not be tolerated, how can we expect change? I'm sure everyone is familiar with the quote, "The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing." This is one of those situations. To our fine police and city council, you are all good people. I challenge you to do something. Address this once and for all. I will be a regular at upcoming city council meetings until change happens. Thank you for your time and consideration. Tebow Robert, Vice President of Beachport Villas HOA. And that concludes public comment.
Can I, Merrick, if I could just quickly respond to that comment. Just to note that we are aware of some issues in that parking lot area at Miranda Park, and as mentioned in the comment, we have worked with our teams to get more presence in the area and more patrols in the area, and we'll continue to work on those and try to have the presence to stop the issue from happening or to respond if issues keep happening. So we are working on that. We'll keep focusing on that moving forward. So we will let the resident know that as well.
Thank you. We'll now move on to agenda approval for City Council. May I have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Thank you. Madam Clerk?
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none, motion passes.
Thank you. Move to the conflict of interest and Levine Act disclosures. Do any members of council have any conflicts of interest to disclose for any item on the agenda? Seeing none, we will move on to presentations. The first presentation is the Peace Officers Memorial Day and National Police Week proclamation. I have the proclamation I will read, and then we will have a few words by our Chief of Police. Peace Officers Memorial Day and National Police Week, May 15th, 2024, and May 12th through 18th, 2024. Whereas the Congress and President of the United States have designated May 15th, 2023 as National Police Officers Memorial Day, and in the week in which it falls as Police Week. And whereas there are approximately 900,000 law enforcement officers serving in communities across the United States, including the dedicated members of the Port Hueneme Police Department. And whereas the members of the Port Hueneme Police Department recognizes the duty to serve the people by safeguarding life and property, by protecting them against violence or disorder, and by protecting the innocent against deception and the weak against oppression or intimidation. And whereas it is proper that we express our gratitude for the dedicated service and courageous deeds of the men and women of the Port Hueneme Police Department, and for the contributions they have made to the security and well-being of all people in our community. And whereas more than 20,000 law enforcement officers in the United States have made the ultimate sacrifice and have been killed in the line of duty, including sworn officers in the county of Ventura. Whereas the names of these dedicated public servants are engraved on the walls of the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial in Washington, D.C. And whereas May 15th, 2024 is designated as National Peace Officers Memorial Day in honor of the service and sacrifice of all officers killed in the line of duty and their families. Now therefore be it proclaimed that the City Council of the City of Port Hueneme formally designates May 12th through May 18th, 2024 as Police Week, and May 15th, 2024 as Police Officers Memorial Day in the City of Port Hueneme, and publicly salute the service of law enforcement officers in our community and in communities across the nation.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you. Just as was stated, May 15th is National Peace Officer Day. So it is there to memorialize our fallen officers. The 138 from last year, 59 so far this year across the country. And it's also there to honor our current peace officers and staff that serve you to today. So no police department can be truly effective without the support and the trust of its community. So it is much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. And can we get a picture of everyone?
We get some of this team that I'm very proud of up here, this incredible team. Oh, you didn't know it was a photo op.
Come on up.
See there.
Is that everybody? Everybody who's here tonight. Sitting in the audience. Except for the one who's on actual duty.
Little bit closer.
The mic. Drop the mic, Mike.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for your service.
Thank you all.
All right, the next presentation is the Dispatcher of the Year Awards Certificate of Recognition presented to Police Dispatcher Samantha Duran.
Yay, Sam. Sam, come on up here while I talk about you and stand here awkwardly. Come on. Very proud of our dispatch team. So, Samantha, aka Sam, started her law enforcement career when she joined the Oxnard Police Explorer program in 2013. She moved up the ranks to the position of Explorer Lieutenant. She was then hired by Oxnard PD as an intern in crime analysis while still in high school. Sam had several roles at Oxnard PD, including IT assistant and eventually becoming a full-time traffic services assistant and a field trainer for that position. Due to her sincerity and teamwork with others, Sam was also a member of the police department's peer support team. Now, Sam has been with Port Hueneme PD since 2022, when she was hired as a community service officer. Soon after coming on board as a CSO, Sam became part of the dispatch team as a dispatcher. She's had several challenging and exciting moments in the PHPD Dispatch Center. On one occasion, Sam was the primary dispatcher when our city experienced major devastating flooding in December of 2023, as you can all remember. She ended up staying over and helping during the crisis, working a 16-plus hour shift. It was one of the highest volume of calls to come into the comm center in such a short amount of time. While at the same time, she had to dispatch coordinating police officer rescue responses and relay information to Ventura County Fire. Sam was also working during a shooting homicide in our city. In that incident, Sam fielded multiple 911 calls, relayed info from a direct witness to our responding units, and had to coordinate the approach of officers as the victim and the suspect were in a residential alley. On another shooting incident, Sam received a phone call from a frightened victim, calmed and questioned the victim, while at the same time coordinating police units to the victim's location, as well as to the location of the fleeing suspects. When Sam was nominated, some of her coworkers commented that Sam was an extremely quick learner and adapted quickly to her solo environment. Sam will come in at a moment's notice and steps up when covering shifts in order to ensure that we have enough staffing for our community. Another one said, Sam is always professional, always courteous. And a few said, Sam is a pleasure to work with and is a very good dispatcher. Sam has an associate's degree in criminal justice and also in social and behavioral science. If you paid attention to the years and the numbers that I mentioned, folks, you got to see Sam did a lot of that in her first year. It's pretty incredible. It shows the type of people we bring on board here for your community. But Sam did all that in her first year. Folks, please join me in honoring Samantha Duran as your PHPD Dispatcher of the Year. And from your council, your certificate of recognition presented to Police Dispatcher Samantha Duran. A recognition of your hard work and dedication with the City of Port Hueneme, your devotion to the city is inspiring. Your longevity and loyalty are recognized and appreciated. Your contributions leave a footprint on the City of Port Hueneme, and it is the City Council's honor to recognize your prestigious award for Dispatcher of the Year.
Can we get a photo?
We'll go up here and take a picture with the council.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Sam. Thank you.
Thank you. And our final presentation tonight is National Public Works Week Proclamation, and Councilmember Gama will be reading the proclamation.
I think I said earlier, there's inspiration all around us, and we've just seen it right now. Really appreciate our Dispatcher of the Year. That's an amazing story. Thank you for serving our city and our residents. National Public Works Proclamation. Advancing Quality of Life for All, May 19th through May 25th, 2024. Whereas public works professionals focus on infrastructure, facilities, and services that are vital importance to the sustainable and resilient communities and the public health, high quality of life, and well-being of the people of the city of Port Hueneme. And whereas these infrastructure facilities and services cannot be provided without the dedicated efforts of public works professionals who are engineers, managers, and employees at all levels of our government and the private sector, who are responsible for rebuilding, improving, and protecting our nation's transportation, water supply, water treatment, solid waste systems, public buildings, and other structures and facilities essential for our citizens. And whereas it is in the public interest of the citizens, civic leaders, and children in the city of Port Hueneme to gain knowledge of and maintain ongoing interest and understanding of the importance of public works and public works programs in their respective communities. And whereas the year 2024 marks the 64th annual National Public Works Week sponsored by the American Public Works Association and the Canadian Public Works Association, be it now, therefore be it proclaimed, that the City Council of the City of Port Hueneme do hereby designate the week of May 19th through May 25th, 2024 as National Public Works Week. We urge all citizens to join with representatives of the American Public Works Association and government agencies in activities, events, and ceremonies designed to pay tribute to our public works professionals, engineers, managers, and employees, and to recognize the substantial contributions they make to protecting our national health, safety, and advancing the quality of life for all here in the city of Port Hueneme. And with that, I'd like to introduce our Public Works Director, Fred Camarillo.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, City Manager, City Attorney, members of the audience. I'd like to, on behalf of the entire department, say thank you for the recognition and the proclamation. As you are all aware, we've had quite a few things happen over the last 6 months that Public Works and everybody really, that's an employee here, have had to respond to. We take great pride in doing what we do. I know that everybody loves doing what they do as well. We don't have anything that we've actually planned for this week. I know some agencies go ahead and set things up where you can go, but some of the things that we do have that are related to Public Works is maybe not everybody's aware. We can offer tours to the water agency. I know some of you have gone and taken that tour to see how the water treatment plant works. Public Works is very involved in the Beach Festival, the Banana Festival, the Touch a Truck event. So we will be at all of those events. At each of those, we take our equipment and have people set up to be able to show how things work, what we do. If there's questions on any of this stuff that they see, we give out information. It's something that we do not just as a part of a Public Works Week, but more of a around the year notifications and presentations, so people have the ability to learn more about what Public Works does and what services we have to offer. And again, I'd like to say thank you for recognizing that, and thank you.
Thank you. Can we get a picture?
Sure.
Everyone, Charles.
If I can get Charles and Dennis to come up too, our water manager and our principal engineer.
Can't you three just do? Okay.
Thank you. All right, that concludes the presentations for tonight. Now we move on to the consent calendar. We will consider items on the consent calendar which will be enacted in one motion unless a council member has a request to remove an item for discussion. Does any council member have a request to remove an item? Seeing none, may I have a second? A
Mayor-
motion and a second.
Mayor, if I may, and
Oh, sorry.
sorry to interrupt. We have one correction, or maybe more of a, well, it's a correction slash clarification that we'd like to recommend, which is on item 6, calling for the election. We had listed the positions with of mayor and council member being up for election. Because we don't have a directly elected mayor, it should be council member and council member up for election. So if council can include just that correction in that motion, then we can make that correction. So
Kind of a motion to approve all, including the correction made to item number 6?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Madam Clerk?
All in favor?
Aye.
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 All opposed? Hearing none, motion passes.
Great. We will now move on to public hearings, right? We're on the same one. I didn't skip anything. Okay. The first item for public hearing is the update to the cannabis ordinance, and that will be given by Staff Director Tony Stewart, I assume? Thank you. First of all, Madam Clerk, do we have proof of publication as required by law and a complete file and report and exhibits?
Yes, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. All yours, Mr. Stewart.
All right. Thank you, Madam Mayor, and members of council, staff, audience. This should be a fairly straightforward hearing here. As you probably remember, just 3 months ago, we updated our ordinance based on several changes that were recommended by staff as well as the community and the council as well. However, we found that there were 3 additional revisions that should be made to the ordinance. So the first one is to remove the requirement that employees go through the city's LifeScan background review. As you recall, this was actually changed in the implementing ordinance or implementing resolution, but we do need to also change the ordinance accordingly. And this was basically per the Chief of Police's recommendation. And it's also a great cost savings to the business owners. However, the business owners themselves and their security guards will still be required to go through the process. The second one came to us fairly recently when we had one of our business owners come to us and ask that they not be required to have an armed guard at their facility during business hours. Now, we require those because they're part of the security plan and part of the certificate of approval process. And as the council well knows, as does the community, one of the reasons why our process or our program here in the city has been so successful is because of these armed guards that are present. They have statistically been proven to lower crime rates around some of our dispensaries. And so speaking with the Chief of Police and some of the other committee members that approved these applications, we determined that actually, no, we did not want to not require them, and instead actually require them per the ordinance, which would be the strongest way to do so. So that's what we are recommending this evening here. And then the final one is just a cleanup of our last ordinance update. We approved the allowance for standalone consumption lounges, and we just want to make sure that the ordinance stated that new standalone lounges had to go through the entire process and not just an update. So we just qualified that in the ordinance. And so with that, the project is exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act, and there is no fiscal impact as a result of this particular ordinance update. And with that, that concludes my presentation. I'm open for any questions that you have.
Thank you. Does council have any questions for staff? Councilmember Hernandez.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart, for your presentation. It's much appreciated. Just have a question for clarification on item 1. So are we saying here that we used to require all employees to get live scanned and go through a background?
Yes, we do.
So now we're just limiting that to the security officers
and the actual business owners.
And the business owners.
Yeah. In
Okay.
fact, the business owners actually have to go through 2 background processes.
Okay.
And that's because of these cost a couple $100 a piece, and with the constant turnover, it's just very difficult for the business owners to keep track of.
Understood, thank you. And then nothing's really changing on the armed guard. We're just really just saying that.
We're codifying it.
Yeah,
yes.
qualifying it, that they do need to have one. And then the third one, if the lounge is attached, they don't have to have a new certificate of approval and entitlements?
They go through a modified process.
one?
Yeah, as you know, Wheelhouse and Skunk Masters have already done that. It's a much simpler process for them, but a new standalone process requires a complete analysis. So we start at the beginning with that.
Okay, thank you. I have no more questions.
Thank you. Councilmember Martinez, do you have any questions?
No questions.
I have a question for public edification. The removal of the requirement for live scans for employees, does that, will that bring up an issue with potentially who's being employed, whether or not they have a criminal background or not? Could that cause an issue since they're working in the marijuana industry?
That would probably be a better question for the chief of police, but their requirements, the DCC requirements, are not as strict for employees as they are for the business owners. The business owners do have a criminal background, and they most likely are not allowed to open the business. But I don't believe that that's the case for the employees, which is why we're recommending the change at this point.
Got it. Thank you. Okay. We are now going to open the public hearing and take public comment. The public hearing is now open for public comment input at 7:11 p.m. Are there any public comments regarding this item?
No, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. We will now close the public hearing. Public input has concluded. I will now close the public hearing, the time being 7:12 p.m. We have before us a recommendation to introduce the first reading by title only, waiving further reading of the ordinance entitled An Ordinance of the City Council of the City of Port Hueneme, California, amending Article 3 of the Municipal Code to supersede Ordinance 796, which comprises Chapter 12, to implement various laws of the state of California by allowing medicinal and non-medicinal and/or commercial cannabis facilities within the city subject to regulatory parameters that protect public health, safety, and welfare, and make a determination the project is exempt under CEQA. May I have a motion and a second?
So moved?
Second.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, any further discussion before we move on for a final vote? Seeing none, thank you.
Councilmember Gama,
Yes.
Councilmember Hernandez.
Yes.
Councilmember Martinez.
Yes.
And Mayor Perez.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. The next public hearing will be the introduction of ordinances amending sections 10802 and 10803 of Chapter 6 of Article 10 of the Port Hueneme Municipal Code pertaining to development standards for accessory dwelling units and density bonus regulations, respectively. Madam Clerk, do we have proof of publication as required by law and a complete file and exhibits?
Yes, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Will staff please present the report?
Okay, thank you again, Madam Mayor. Yes, so this one's a little bit more complicated and interesting than the last one was, I think. But currently, both of our ADU and density bonus ordinances, as you mentioned, are contained in the same chapter of our municipal code. However, because the state continues to change the laws for both, as I will discuss in the next slide. In fact, we just have a brand new one that came through. It's simpler for staff to make the necessary updates and bring them back to you with the standalone ordinances. So starting with our ADU ordinance, you'll see that I had to add the word former there. Former California Government Code sections 65852, et cetera, set forth ADU development standards for all jurisdictions, including charter cities such as ours here in the state of California. However, I was just informed a couple hours before this meeting that actually the state has already changed the statutes. They now have new reference numbers, starting with 66310. And so what staff is recommending here is that the ADU ordinance be updated simply to state something such as any succeeding state code sections. So if they do change in the future, we don't have to come back to you and change them. So because that's not a substantive change, we can go ahead and do that between now and the second reading at our next meeting without any further discussion. So the intent of the state law is to overcome barriers for affordable housing by providing housing choices to serve different populations. In fact, per the government code, accessory dwelling units offer lower cost housing to meet the needs of existing and future residents within existing neighborhoods while respecting architectural character. And to ensure as much land use as possible, which is continually being stripped away from us, the city must adopt an ADU ordinance, or we are required simply to abide by all state mandates, whether or not they would be something that was beneficial to the city. So then the ordinance has to be approved by the state's Department of Housing and Community Development, commonly known as HCD. Now, as you probably all recall, we just recently updated our ADU ordinance. It seems to happen on an almost annual basis at this point. And we sent it to HCD, who replied back on January 24th of this year with 3 issues. So the former city attorney and I met with the HCD staff a couple of times to iron out what we hope is ironing out the issues, to discuss them, see where they were coming from, and therefore staff is now recommending the following 3 basic revisions to the ordinance to hopefully satisfy HCD's comment letter. And I shouldn't say 3, it's 2, but we'll go into that further. So the first item was to clarify the number of ADUs allowed on a single-family lot. Keep in mind, we're talking single-family lots and not multifamily. The current ADU ordinance allows 1 attached ADU plus 1 junior ADU, or JADU, per lot, or 1 detached ADU plus 1 junior ADU per lot. HCD disagrees and believes that property owners should be allowed to have 1 ADU attached, 1 detached ADU, plus a JADU. And they cite it basically 1 government code section with 4 subsections, A through D. Now, the city disagrees with this, and we had a discussion. It was a pretty colorful discussion for 2 reasons. First of all, when you read the code sections, Section A talks about 1 attached ADU plus 1 attached junior ADU per single-family lot, period. Section B is 1 detached ADU plus 1 junior ADU per single-family lot, period. Section C moves on to multifamily dwellings, and it talks about the number of attached ADUs that can be allowed with a multifamily project, period. And Section D pertains to detached ADUs on multifamily lots, period. I mentioned the word period because there are no ands or ors between A, B, C, and D. So first of all, the way that it's being interpreted versus how it actually reads per state statute is incorrect because, again, it's not A plus B. It's one or the other. The other thing where they're wrong is that C and D don't even pertain to single-family lots. So a single-family lot is not going to have a multifamily dwelling on it, and so those are completely irrelevant to the argument here. So to hopefully satisfy HCD's comments, though, staff is proposing to revise Section D6A through D of our ordinance, which is pages 5 and 6, to quote state law at this point, just simply quote the state law. That also requires us to remove our previous multifamily development standards because they're now brought into this new one. And staff will just simply continue to interpret the state law as we have been, but at least it's clearly stated in our ordinance what the state requires. We're hoping that works, but we'll see, because with item number 2, it addresses setbacks, and the current ordinance basically repeats state law. In fact, it doesn't basically, it does, where it talks about when you have 1 ADU and 1 junior ADU per lot, they are allowed, provided that, and I quote, "the side and rear setbacks are sufficient for fire and safety." Now, it doesn't mention any specific number, such as 4-foot setbacks, et cetera. It just says sufficient for fire and safety. This is actual state law. HCD took issue with their own state law and thought it was too subjective. So we are recommending that we add to this the words "as required by the Uniform Building and Uniform Fire Codes as adopted by the city." Hopefully that's objective enough, because those codes actually do allow less than 4-foot setbacks depending on the design of the structure, basically. So for us to put in 4 foot would at that point be out of compliance with the state law. So we're hoping that this satisfies them by at least specifying which exact codes a developer would need to abide by. And then our final item is one that HCD has had some issues with in the past, and that's our affordability covenant. As we've discussed in the past, and as I discussed at the beginning of this presentation, since ADUs are considered by state law to be an affordable type of residential unit, we require a covenant to be recorded with each ADU. And it's basically an affordable housing covenant for 55 years to ensure that the units remain affordable to low-income households. Now, this does not apply to if the ADU is built for family members, such as a true granny flat or a senior or a caregiver, but most are not. And when HCD were alerted of this, they were first alerted by an out-of-town developer who, again, wanted to just come in, redevelop, and rent the ADU out for whatever the market rate would be, basically to the detriment of the community, basically. Then the second one that alerted them was a local property owner of a small apartment complex. All of the units are older, 1-bedroom units. State law actually now allows this person to build 2 detached ADUs on the site, and they're actually allowed to be full-on 3-bedroom units. So you're going to have families living in there, which is great, but they don't have to pay school fees, impact fees, or whatnot. The problem is with that particular development, they renovated all of the other units without any building permits. And so state law does not allow us to fix planning problems such as setbacks that are insufficient, but they do allow us to hold issuance of building permits if the building code is not being complied with, then there's a potential for safety issues. And so, for instance, if you don't know how the wiring's been redone or whatnot, there is a fire safety issue there. So we are requiring this person to get building permits for the 11 first units before they can get the new ADUs, because again, we don't want the whole place to go up in flames or whatnot. So we are allowed to do that. Well, HCD took issue because they felt that our code was prohibiting folks from getting building permits before they had the affordability covenant recorded with the county. But if you look at our current standards, it says prior to occupancy. So folks can get a building permit. They just need to make sure that they get the covenant approved or recorded prior to us issuing the occupancy permit. So we're not recommending any changes to our code because we're already basically in compliance with what we feel HCD is saying, which is just get those permits issued. So our current code allows that to happen. We'll just make sure the staff continues to allow that, basically, and that we don't have any confusion at the counter. And so with that, I'll move into the density bonus ordinance here. So the density bonus ordinance is governed by a different section of the government code. And what it does is basically it allows a developer to exceed the maximum density allowed in a zone. For instance, if the density is, say, 5 units per acre for a multifamily development, they may be able to, depending on how many affordable units they provide on the site, say, have 10 units per acre. They can double that, for instance. And we went through something similar when we approved the Surfside Motel project. And it also talks about what are called concessions or incentives, which are a nice way of saying variances without having to meet the state variance requirements. And again, this is in exchange for the provision of affordable units on a project, and that the developer does have to prove that these additions are necessary to basically finance the project. So our ordinance is a little out of date. We initially adopted it in 1999 and revised it back in 2012. But since then, there have been many, many changes to state law again. Now, unlike ADU laws, there are no provisions for any kind of adjustments to suit local needs. We are mandated, whether we're a charter city or not, to comply with all density bonus law. But you may ask, why do we even have this? And it really is just more of a service so that, you know, the developers and staff and you as the decision makers when it comes to you know what the requirements are. It's just already in our ordinance. So we did have to make quite a few revisions. The first one deals with the actual density bonus. This is on tables 5 and 6 of the red line ordinance that you had. And basically what it does now is it grants an additional amount of density depending on the type of project, the level of income, but it also requires that if, for instance, say the very low, they're on top go, you know, it used to be 35% was the top density, now allows up to 50%, but it also requires additional affordable units to get that additional density. There are a few new groups in there as well, such as the foster youth, veterans, homeless persons, students, as well as 100% affordable projects. So those we all need to basically provide for as well at this point. The second one is a whole brand new section for our ordinance. We've never had this before because this is a recent requirement of the state. And this allows commercial projects to have commercial density bonuses, such as additional parking, additional floor area ratio, additional building height, if the developer partners with a residential developer to either build affordable units on the site, such as a mixed-use project, or at least within close proximity within the city. So we had to add section E4 to the ordinance, which is on pages 8 and 9 of the ordinance there, to address the new state laws with regard to this. This will be kind of interesting, for instance, if we ever, you know, through the general plan, we had changed, say, the 99-cent center, making it mixed use. It'll be interesting to see if a future developer comes in and wants to take advantage of something like this. The third change is a pretty quick one, and that is that it increases the term of affordability from 30 years to 55 years. And that's standard for affordable projects, and it's actually a good thing because it means the life of the affordable project is that much longer. The fourth one changes the number of concessions or incentives allowed for a project. It used to be a maximum of 3, now it's a maximum of 5. But again, that if they want more concessions, then it means that they have to provide more affordable units. And an example of concession, again, is reduced parking, reduced setbacks, additional building height, or whatnot. And speaking of increased building height, state law allows that if a project is within half mile of what they call a major transit stop, which is, for instance, the intersection of 2 transit lines, or a bus terminal or something like that, and above and beyond everything else that the developer could ask for, they can get up to 3 additional stories of their building. The good news for Hueneme, at least, is we have none of that. So we don't have to worry about this right now, but it's still in the table just in case it ever does get to that point. So we'll see. And with additional development, well, we may sometime. So we'll see. And then we also are now required to address waivers. So in addition to everything else I've told you a developer can ask for, if there's anything in our municipal code that would prohibit them from developing their site with all of these concessions and additional height and density and whatnot, then they can ask for additional, now they're called waivers instead of concessions, but basically additional concessions or waivers to deviate from those other standards in the code. So in other words, there's a great loss in land use authorization at this point. You know, we've just pretty much, if a developer can prove that all of this is necessary to provide the affordable housing, they can ask for it, basically. And it's very, very difficult to deny any of these regulations, as you, again, know from the Surfside Motel project. And then finally, just a couple of cleanup items at the end of the ordinance. This is really, again, just for transparency so that everybody's on the same page. First is that we are adding application submittal requirements, just again so that an applicant knows what they need to submit to get through the process that much more cleanly. It also clarifies staff review provisions, so staff knows what they're doing with regard to or need to do with regard to these applications. And then finally, we just added a statement that the state law will be complied with at all times. And so with that, the project's exempt from CEQA in two ways. First of all, in fact, it kind of demonstrates how these have taken away even the power of CEQA, where ADU ordinances are now statutorily exempt from CEQA. It's no longer a category, it's just they are flat out exempt from CEQA. And then because this particular project will not generate any actual development, the developments that do come through will be analyzed at the time that they come through to you. It's also exempt from CEQA in that regard. And then there will be no direct fiscal impact, but this increased density could feasibly increase property values, which of course increases property taxes for us. So we'll see how that plays out in the future. And also, we do have that SB2 grant, I think you may be aware of, or recall when we got that. And so that paid for some of my time as well as Rincon's time. We hired them to actually go through all the state density bonus law because there was so much of it to go through at this point. So, so that is being reimbursed by the planning grant. And so with that, I think, James, you were, or City Manager Vega, you were going to mention something.
Yeah, thank you, Tony. Yes. Thank you for the presentation. I think there's no simple way to really explain all of these changes. It's very complicated, very dense. But we received a comment, and I know Georgiana will read those, and we might hear some more comments. And I think some of the comments were focused on the idea of these new state mandates and not being, not as a city looking to kind of buck the state mandates, but looking instead at working with the state. And I think that I just wanted to speak a little bit to that because I think one of the common themes that we heard in the presentation, and I just want to highlight, is, there were several findings by the state of things that weren't in the code, and we disagreed with those findings, but we made the changes after we met with the state and we talked to the state. We kind of figured out, okay, what word is it in particular that's causing a problem? And so what we're recommending and what we're proposing is intended to get us in compliance with the state's requirements. I think we heard in the presentation that some of the statutes and things have already changed. I expect that to be an ongoing theme. Every year, the state is trying harder and harder to push for more ADUs, more units to be built, more housing to be available. So I think we're going to just see every year we're going to get new requirements, and it'll be something we keep chasing. But I don't think the intent at this time and the impression we're trying to give isn't that we're fighting the state. It's that we're working with them to get in compliance, but maintaining whatever local control we have, which really should be maybe our theme as we work with them. There are some cities who've tried to take a hard line with the state and have spent a lot of money to do it, and so far the results haven't been very good, so it's just not a path that we would look to take at this point. I think one thing from the recent meeting we had with the state that I thought was kind of enlightening to me was we met with them and we told them some of these things aren't going to help with affordability. It's going to make houses more expensive. It's going to make our the cost of our properties go up. And I think in that conversation with the state, it kind of came to the conclusion that at this point, the state's goal is really to get units built. And I think it's kind of goes back to that idea, which not everybody agrees with, but I think the state's position at this point is if they get enough units built throughout the state, so there's enough supply that, costs will eventually come down. I don't know that I agree with that when you're in a community that everybody wants to move to and everybody wants to live in, and you can keep adding and people still want to keep moving. But that focus of the state mandates has sort of shifted to build as many units as possible, make the codes as easy as possible for people to build those units. And that's what we're trying to satisfy without giving up all of our local control. So I just wanted to explain that, and just to give that general tone. I think we've been having ongoing conversations with the state for quite a while. I think there's obviously frustration of how many times we've had to go through the process, but our intent at this point, and when we met with the state, we told them our intent is tell us what you need for us to get into compliance with that, and I think that's what we're doing today. We'll, if council approves the proposed ordinance, we'll submit it to the state. We might get another response back that maybe there's a word or two that we need to add, and if we do that, we'll come back and go through the process, but our intent is to work with them to get into compliance with all the HCD, which is the state's Housing and Community Development Department requirements. So with that, we recommend adopting the ordinance.
I think also you mentioned, Mr. City Manager, was first making sure the state is happy with the wording, and then you mentioned they want things built.
Yeah.
They just want more buildings built.
Yep.
But we have our own priority, which is affordable housing to be built. So that is also a part of our ordinance as well, is still to allow the buildings to be built, but to also keep our affordable housing.
And that's included in the ordinance. I think that was a good example from our meeting with the state where some of the arguments over the last year, I think, really boiled down to the state is okay with an affordable housing covenant, but the process we were going through was not the exact process that they would want us to go through. And it was literally just like the timing of recording the covenant. So we met with them. That's what they told us. We've put together an ordinance where we can adjust that and be in compliance. And the only reason I'm not sitting here confidently saying they'll adopt it is because when we send it, they might decide that it's not enough after all. But we met with them, we had that conversation, and we recommend these 3 changes, which we think, based on that conversation, get us where we need to be to move forward. So
Thank you. Thank you, Director Stewart, for your presentation. Does council have any questions? Go ahead, Councilmember Gama.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you, City Manager. So I think you answered my first question so HCD is the state.
Correct. Yeah, they're the agency that is state agency charged with basically regulating ADUs.
Okay. And I could share with everybody that I don't think there's a city in California that's kind of thrilled about this. It's a mandate, it strips away local control, and it's, there's basically nothing you could do about it. But when we get into a situation when I heard you earlier say that the city disagrees. So when we disagree with HCD, we're locking horns with the state. And I know it's difficult to understand all this because be honest with you, I don't really understand how complicated this could be, but it is very complicated. I will say that the ADUs that I've seen locally around here that are, in my view, probably 3/4 of the way completed, they're a very nice addition to the big lots that they're being put on. There's one right over here on Pleasant Valley that, it's great. But when I look at it, I realize affordability, there's no way that thing's going to rent out for less than $3,000 a month. I mean, the rents in our area being what they are already extremely high. And so it just kind of, I don't know, I don't understand how is this being deemed affordability. And the only thing that I'm a little concerned about is, are we obligating every ADU, junior ADU, attached family to be affordable housing units? Is that what we're doing? And does that diminish owners' enthusiasm for building an ADU?
So far, it has not. Like I said, the only 2 instances that we have are the 2 that I spoke to earlier. And those are folks that are either out-of-town developers or basically they're property owners and developers. These are not your mom and pops and whatnot. And also, as I mentioned, we do have exceptions already built into the ordinance for ADUs that are for family members, caretakers, and seniors. So they don't need to have those covenants anyway. So if somebody wants to truly build one for their family member, such as their in-laws or whatnot, they do not need to have that covenant. It's for the folks that are wanting to rent these out as an additional rental unit. And part of the reasoning behind this is that there's the assumption that, and this is actually the state's assumption, and if you see, the parking regulations and whatnot that they've now basically taken away, their assumption is that people that are moving into these units are not going to require vehicles, but we know that they do and whatnot, and especially if you are renting them out to full-on families and not necessarily affordable, lower income families. The other thing that we've found in the past too is that we're a beach community, and so if somebody builds this ADU and it's being rented out during the summer months, say for 3 months, and they're renting it out at $5K a month or something, and then they're not renting it out for the rest of the year, that is not even a family unit at that point. That's just a vacation unit, and so those are several of the reasons why we require the covenant for the for-profit rental units.
And I was going to circle back to that. So the simple answer to that first part of your question is we do require a covenant, subject to there's exceptions built in for specific circumstances. That is something that that is a policy choice. The council can look at that and revisit that. I think Mr. Stewart gave sort of the explanation, the answer of sort of the challenges we're seeing with it and why why a lot of communities are putting those requirements in place, because I guess to your point is they still aren't very affordable to build. And then once you build it, people are trying to make the investment back, and that means they aren't renting, without those covenants in place, they don't rent. They're not naturally affordable. A lot of people, I think, if you own the land right now, I've heard numbers of $350,000 to $450,000 to build an accessory dwelling unit, an affordable unit. So if there isn't that covenant in place, my guess is it would be $3,000 to $4,000 a month rent or more. So it's a policy decision that the council could look at, but I think up until now and in the prior ordinances, the goal of allowing ADUs was to increase affordable housing unit availability, so it's been included in the ordinance up till this point.
Mayor Perez, may I have one more question?
Sure.
So I really like Gill Street. I love that street. The lots are huge, and it's the perfect area for ADUs. I mean, it really is. Whether the owners of those properties can afford it or not, that's a separate issue. But let's just say that the majority of those property owners are able to establish an ADU. Maybe they're doing it for retirement, for security into the future. But if say 70% of those units or those lots, and they're very large lots, I mean, I'd love that street, then you would have a situation where no parking, too many people trying to live in one little area, and then what does the city do? Do we unrealistically say, well, they're not going to have cars? I mean, I just feel like at some point when you have enough supply that the cost of housing should go down, but I just don't see that happening here. And I may be wrong, but any ideas as to the affordability question down the road?
Yeah, I think those are good points. We met, Tony, myself, and the Public Works team met, and we were talking through some of the issues, and there's even more than just parking. And remember, there's a parking item on the agenda that almost relates back to this, of just everything's getting more dense, and it's creating new parking issues, new traffic issues, line of sight issues. The more units and the more people get squeezed into smaller spaces, which is just, again, for the record, the state mandate that we don't have any option over, except basically, whether we make them deed restricted and that kind of thing. So there's challenges, but we talked about some of the other challenges that people don't think about, like our water system and our sewer system. And if you're adding, 2 more families per property, how long can our sewer system support that? And there's real challenges like that. Thankfully, there are some allowances in our code and that the state hasn't taken away yet, where we can make some decisions based on if it's going to just cause our sewer system to fail, for example. But those are things that we have to start preparing for, as now the state has opened this up a lot more than it used to be. I think as far as it goes to affordability, that's really, like, at a basic level, the policy decision at this point is, I think that us and others, a lot of other cities have decided that it's worth doing this if it's going to provide affordable housing to people. But if it's not going to provide affordable housing, then it's not worth doing. It's not worth impacting the quality of life in a neighborhood without the city getting some benefit from it and the residents getting some benefit from it. But that is something that probably is going to change over time, and I think ADUs are just becoming more and more of a by right thing in more communities. So it's something that, like I said, I expect this ordinance to keep coming back every year, or maybe even more frequently in the future. So
Thank you. Councilmember Hernandez?
Thank you, Mayor Perez. Thank you, Tony. Mr. Stewart, for your report. I know the housing element, the general plan, all this stuff ties together, and it's HCD does not make your job very much easier. We're not alone. I know through my work on the committees through SCAG, Southern California Association of Governments, California League of Cities, recently at VCOG, all cities are complaining about the heavy-handedness of HCD. And I think there's even some legislation now cropping up to push back on HCD. So I think the general feeling is they just have too much control, too much authority, and it doesn't seem like, for us, it's an efficient way of doing business, especially if it doesn't result in affordable homes. So I guess there was a question in there somewhere, and the question is, based on their the way HCD has been working and the fact that you had a recent change before coming to this meeting, what's the likelihood that we're going to see another change before this comes back for a second reading?
It's a very good question. And one of the things I didn't mention earlier, but I will now, is, and Mayor Perez brought this up at the last meeting, which was the recent strike down of the SB 9 laws for charter cities. And that was, it's a similar type of legislation, but it was struck down because it was not, it was too general the way HCD was interpreting it, basically, and the state was applying it to everybody. And I say that because looking at it from a legal point of view, even though I'm an attorney, but I've been around this enough to know that, really, even our discussions this evening, ADU laws also are being interpreted differently by different agencies and whatnot, including HCD for their own state statutes. And so it might be kind of interesting, as you just mentioned, that there's becoming quite a bit of pushback, and so we may actually see some of it go in the other direction. But I do think that there will continue to be changes, and as they come through, we can always readdress again the idea of whether or not we want to have those covenants. Right now, we're recommending that we keep them in for the time being and see what HCD says, but at some point, if they continue to push back, we will need to most likely have a discussion about what policy, which way we want to take this policy, basically.
Yeah, thank you for taking them to task, both you and the city manager. Much appreciated. That's all I have.
Councilmember Martinez? Yes, I was going to bring up the charters, all the charter cities getting together. I saw that through SCAG and Cal League of Cities and everyone, all the charter cities coming together to push back against the state. So I was wondering, are we participating in that, or where are we in that regard?
Well, we did send a letter of support for the pushback on the SB 9 last year. At this point, I'm not aware of an actual push again, but if there is one, then we can, again, internally decide whether or not we want to support that push or not. But again, you know, the pushback, as long as it doesn't cost us any money, you know, again, it's trying to protect our local land use authority, and because, you know, it's been established to ensure that our community is what it is, and to protect it. And so, you know, right now the policy, or at least, is that, you know, we'll continue to at least try to protect that, as long as it doesn't really become a cost for the city, because, you know, we're not a large city and we don't have the funds to
Fight the state.
fight the state, basically. Well, at least that's what we're discussing now. We'll have to, again, have that discussion if we do get there at some point. Yes.
All right. Thank you. So I will open the public hearing and take public comment. The public hearing is now open for public input at 7:50 p.m. Are there any public comments regarding this item?
I have one written comment. Staff is asking the council to authorize new ordinance controlling ADUs in Hueneme. The current ordinance was rejected by Housing and Community Development, HCD, which is a state agency controlling housing policy in California. City staff and HCD have gone back and forth over these issues, and neither side has appeared to back down. The current ordinance contains the same policies that have been repeatedly rejected by HCD. There is no reason to expect a different outcome if the current ordinance is adopted. These are the outstanding issues. The ordinance requires owner occupancy. State law AB 976 specifically removes the owner occupancy requirement for ADUs and keeps it for JADUs. State law eliminates some parking requirements for ADUs if there is a public transportation available within a half mile. City staff interprets this to mean a major transit center. The HCD handbook clearly states public transportation, not a major transit center. One would be hard-pressed to find any lot in Hueneme that is more than half a mile from a bus stop. The ordinance requires that homeowners rent ADUs to low-income tenants for the next 110 years and demands annual reports from homeowners. HCD rejected the low-income requirement. Requiring ADUs to be rented to low-income residents will limit the number of ADUs being constructed. A combination of market rate and government subsidized ADUs will increase housing units. A better policy would be to end the low-income requirement and offer incentives to entice builders to accept low-income tenants. State law appears to limit each residential property to 2 ADUs, an ADU and a JADU. The ordinance is consistent with this. However, HCD rejected it. Their position is that 3 ADUs are allowed. They include 1 unit from the conversion of a previously permitted structure, 1 new build, and 1 JADU. The city's policy is in line with everything I have read on the subject. It is also the current policy in Ventura County. On the face of it, the city seems to be right, but it's looking like it will take litigation or legislative action to resolve the issue. In the meantime, the city's ordinance is out of compliance and may be unenforceable. Unless city staff can convince HCD to modify their demands, which seems unlikely, or city staff backs off, it appears that these issues are headed for litigation with the state. Refusal to comply with HCD may also put the city at risk for individual lawsuits for violating state law. Is this how the council wants to spend tax dollars? Seems like a better idea to create an ordinance that HCD will accept and make changes as the courts sort these issues out. In other words, let municipalities with deeper pockets litigate these issues and change the ordinance as these issues are resolved in court. Thanks for listening, David Scrivener. And that concludes public comment.
Mayor, can I just make one comment there? And maybe it would have made more sense for my comment to come after that, because I sort of addressed that. But it's a lot of good points, and like we said, we really don't want to get into that situation with HCD of potentially litigating it. I think the 3 points that were mentioned and how the comment was that it looks like we're just adopting the same ordinance, and we're not responding to those 3. In a very brief summary, that meeting we had was specifically on those 3 items, and there were literally situations where 1 word difference, the state said that would make the difference and make it acceptable to the state. So this ordinance is very similar to the past ordinance, but it just has a couple of those small changes. Like I said, it could be something like the timing of requiring something after the building is built instead of before the building is built, but we can still require it as an example. So this ordinance actually, it might look like it's just another attempt to just slam the same ordinance through, but that's not the intent. This was intended to be an ordinance after we met with them to address the very specific, very focused 3 issues that they raised. So we're recommending council consider that.
All right, I trust you on that. You were the ones in the meeting with the state, so you understand what their issues were, well, as much as you can. So I will now, that concludes public comment. So I will now close the public hearing, the time being 7:55. Okay.
See if I could state this the way I had it. So these are the responses from HCD to our proposed new ordinance, or are we going to pass the ordinance, kick it off to them, and then be back with disagreements?
So HCD sent a response to our prior ordinance. This is now.
These are the responses in our book?
Yes. And we noted in the staff report the 3 issues that HCD had.
Okay.
We then met with HCD. We looked literally, okay, if this word changes, are you okay with it? And they verbally in the meeting said yes. We're making those changes and sending it back to HCD, and the hope is that they stand by that and they approve it. But I will also say, because I've worked, Tony and I both have gone through a lot with HCD in the last few years with housing elements and everything. It wouldn't surprise me if it comes back and there's 1 or 2 more things that they ask for. But we're doing what they asked. And as an example, the comment was made about the HCD says that you can have 3, basically a ADU, junior ADU, and another ADU on each property. The staff report, we note that we disagreed with that. We met with them and we told them we disagreed with it, but we ultimately included that language in the ordinance to satisfy that requirement. So that's where we are trying to address those concerns that HCD had with the prior ordinance.
So the worst case scenario here then could be that a new manager comes to the unit that manages the city of Port Hueneme, and they throw out the whole ordinance and say, what are you guys thinking?
Potentially, but typically the way it works is if you're making progress, they send you back a letter saying, thank you for your next attempt, but here's now the 2 things we need you to fix for it to be in compliance, and then you go through that kind of over and over again.
It seems like you're used to this.
Yeah. Well, remember, and I don't think it was Port Hueneme had a fairly good RENA, and so it wasn't really talked about as much here, but RENA, Regional Housing Unit Allocation, was a hot topic in every other city last year. And that was the last round with HCD, where HCD was telling every city that they had to submit their housing elements with that met their RENA requirements, and cities that don't build very much were getting huge numbers, and it was scaring people because they had to basically allow for huge numbers of units to be built. So we got lucky in Port Hueneme, and we didn't really get a lot of that pressure, but a lot of cities did, and the process was very similar to this of just kind of working submittal by submittal to get closer to getting it approved and then finally getting approved. So I think we're in that process, and I think the last meeting we had, we got those last 3 hiccups out of the way, as long as nothing changes between now and then. So
I think our number was 125.
Yeah.
But still, where are we going to put 125?
To the comment earlier about, does the affordability covenant impact demand of ADUs? We're seeing the highest number of ADUs applied for that we've seen, and I think it was 50 something last year.
Close to that.
Yeah, so that's a lot for us. And in the past, before the last couple of years, it was probably single digits, is my guess. So.
Okay, no further comments?
If I might, Mayor, keep in mind these statutes are written for big cities, not
Yes.
just communities, and they're not geared towards a unique community like this. So they don't really apply very well. And I think what staff has done is written an ordinance that accommodates their needs. Whether or not HCD is going to come back with something else, they are changing their minds continually. So
No, I was in a SCAG meeting, and everybody was up in arms and discussing their numbers, and I recall I was thinking, I am in a city with no land, or landlocked, by an ocean, a base, and another city. What am I gonna do? Start building into the ocean? We're gonna create a harbor? Have some houseboats out there? I mean, what are we gonna do? Yeah, like, but our council years ago, when they tried to build up, depending on where it was, they said no. People said no, who had vacation homes, didn't want their views blocked. It's like, what do we do? But anyway, thank you. No further questions by council? All right, seeing none, we will close the public hearing, the now time being 7:59 p.m. We have a recommendation before us to introduce the first reading by title only, waiving further reading of an ordinance entitled, An Ordinance of the City Council of the City of Port Hueneme, California, amending Section 10802 of Chapter 6 of Article 10 of the Port Hueneme Municipal Code pertaining to development standards for accessory dwelling units, and introduce for first reading by title only, waiving further reading of an ordinance entitled, An Ordinance of the City Council of the City of Port Hueneme, California, amending Section 10803 of Chapter 6 of Article 10 of the Port Hueneme Municipal Code pertaining to density bonus requirements, and make a determination the project is exempt from under CEQA. May I have a motion and a second? I'll move. Don't you guys all go at first, at once, guys. Need a second.
Second.
Thank you.
It's just the first reading.
Madam Clerk. Madam Clerk, will you please take a vote?
Councilmember Gama,
I don't like state mandates, and what we heard from our city attorney, this was not written for small cities, but unfortunately, I'm going to have to support our staff and vote yes.
Councilmember Hernandez.
Yes.
Councilmember Martinez.
Yes.
And Mayor Perez.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Moving on to business items. The first business item is the Panoma Street parking concerns and option for stop sign installation. Will staff please present the report?
Thank you. We'll have a brief presentation. This item actually kind of fits after the last item because it's part of what we're trying to do is knowing that these changes are coming, knowing that some of these state mandates are coming, we're starting to look proactively at some things that we might have to start thinking about a little differently. And as an example, as units get added into properties, as lot splits are allowed by the state and people can split their lots and add more units, we are going to start seeing some parking impacts. We're going to start seeing state mandated densification. And so we wanted to start looking proactively at that, and our Public Works Department and I and Mr. Stewart had met, and we had talked about some of these impacts, and we talked about coming up with some ideas, and one of those was a stop sign process that would allow for situations where the city could install stop signs where in the past maybe they weren't necessary or weren't required or justified. And so our city code allows us to install stop signs in special circumstances if it's approved by the council. And so we've put together a policy to try to start identifying when and how we're going to do that. So with that, I'll introduce Charles Cable, our principal engineer for the city, to give a little bit more detail.
Hello? Okay. Good evening, Madam Mayor, council members, and the general public. James summarized it pretty well, but I have a little presentation here to go over how this came about in the Panoma Street area and some of the parking restrictions we're going to be facing in the future. In the spring of 2023, we received a complaint about sight distance being impacted by parked cars at Panoma Street intersecting with A, B, and C Street. Sight distance is the distance needed for minimum visibility of drivers on a side street to see oncoming traffic to pull out safely into an intersection. When we received the complaint, we hired a contract traffic engineer to investigate the area, and they provided recommendations. That included painting the curb red to increase sight distance. In the summer of 2023, the streets crew was deployed to start painting the curbs red per the recommendations. As they were painting the curbs, the complaints started to roll in. The complaint had to do with the red curbs affecting the parking. So we instructed the streets crews to immediately hold off painting the curb as we reevaluated the intersections. The primary concern is always safety for pedestrians and vehicles. However, we are sensitive to the parking issue in the neighborhood, so we had the traffic engineer come back and reevaluate the red curb. His evaluation indicated that we could potentially use stop signs to increase the sight distance and remove some of the red curb. The stop signs could be installed per standard operating procedures that are included in your packet. And in those procedures, they outline where we can install stop signs and how to remove them after an evaluation period. And that's what we're presenting as a recommendation today. So if we were to install stop signs per the recommendation, we would remove 40 feet of red curb on B Street and install stop signs at B Street and Clara. So while we were reevaluating the intersections, California passed AB 413, also known as the daylighting law, reaffirming our finding for increasing sight distance at intersections for safety reasons. The law prohibits parking within 20 feet of any marked or unmarked crosswalk. The state continues to implement regulations that increase densities in neighborhoods like this via the ADU and density bonus ordinance. So the law came into effect at the beginning of the year, and whether the curbs are marked red or not, motorists are prohibited from parking at the intersections within 20 feet. So we have looked at solutions to address the parking issues in the neighborhood, while still also addressing the original complaint. So go back here. So we have looked at the solution. Okay, sorry. If City Council elects to add stop signs, then we can add an additional 60 feet of parking on Panoma. The City Manager and the Public Works Director also worked with the Naval Base to remove street parking restrictions on San Pedro, netting an additional 40 spaces for the neighborhood. If we install the stop signs on B Street, we'll be allowed to remove the red curb. And the recommendation is that the City Council consider whether to approve an 18-month demonstration installation of the stop signs for four-way stop control at Panoma Street, intersecting with Clara and B Street. And that concludes the presentation.
Thank you. Does council have any questions for staff?
Did you say it was going to take 18 months?
We're going to evaluate it for the first 6 months, and per the procedure, we're going to look at if there's an increase in car accidents. Since the red curbs were installed, there's only been one on Panoma Street. I couldn't pull the exact cause of the accident because the SWORT system was down. That's where we report our traffic collision data. But since August, there's only been one. In the prior years, there's been 3, 2022 and 2021, there's been 3 on Panoma Street.
So the process would be kind of the next steps is if council approves this policy, we'd bring a resolution back at, we're aiming for the next council meeting to actually install the ones at the Panoma location. There has to be a resolution approved by council to be, satisfy our code requirements that it be council approved. So we would install the stop sign after that's approved as quickly as possible. And then the 6 months and the 18 months is when we would have a review if there's any accidents. So if there was any sign that it wasn't safe, we would bring it back and review that and consider it.
That's correct.
Councilmember Gama?
I saw some audience participation in regards to that accident. I think the gesture was that it may have been a drunk driving. Okay. Okay. So does the fact that the accident was the result of drunk driving, does that take it out of the equation, or how does that?
We can't, we're not getting you on the recording. Do you want to come up and speak at the podium? No problem.
Hi, I'm Tracy J. We've talked lots of times before. So yeah, we live in the area where you're talking about, and I really do appreciate you guys are still keeping this under observation and finding some solutions for our neighborhood. We live right next to that ADU, a new one that they just built with no parking that's striped all the way around with the bus stop. So that particular location is not low income either, as far as I can tell, because when I called, it was up there in the cost. But the parking would be a great help for our neighborhood. We have a lot of red painting that we started painting down the roads. Some of them are more than the 20-foot law that came into effect. So our hopes was at least we could slim back to the least the legal or the new law that came into effect, which was the 20-foot. And maybe we could put some either speed bumps in the future or stop signs, because I think budget-wise, it's probably friendlier to do the stop signs. But the accidents that we see, because they're pretty loud and obnoxious, everybody's outside, and we know that one was an underage, unlicensed driver that crashed into the corner. And I just think speed is a factor. It's not necessarily a visibility. They're always speeding through at 50 plus down that street because it's like a straightaway, there's no stop signs. So my big concern that it's not necessarily that there's no visibility, it's speed. So if we can slow down the traffic with some stop signs, I think that can help some of the safety issues on that street.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Any further questions for council? All right. Seeing none. And we have no public comments on this item?
No.
Thank you. So the recommendation is to consider whether to approve an 18-month demonstration installation of stop signs for multi-way stop control at Pomona
One more time.
intersecting with Clara and B Street. May I have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Madam Clerk?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none, motion passes.
Thank you, Charles. The next item up is the fiscal year 2022 to 23 annual comprehensive financial report. Staff, please present the report.
Yeah, and I'm going to introduce Lupe, and this time I'm going to try not to spoil the presentation like I think I just did with Charles. I stole his thunder. This is our annual comprehensive financial report. It used to be called the CAFR. People might remember. I think they switched. It used to be comprehensive annual financial report. Now it's annual comprehensive financial report. But really, what it is without the acronyms is. Yeah, I know. I can't say it yet. So, but what it is at the end when we close out a fiscal year, and the fiscal years are confusing because they don't line up with our calendar years. So in this case, we close out our fiscal year that ended June 30th, 2023, and then it gets closed, and then we hire an auditor to come audit us and make sure we did everything appropriately, and then we get our used to be CAFR, now it's an ACFR, I guess, and basically they'll identify if there's any issues, any problems, and then it also kind of summarizes our financial position. So I will introduce our finance director, who's going to walk us through, now that we're complete, what the findings were and what our position is.
Thank you.
Didn't sound like it.
Okay.
Okay.
Good evening, Mayor and Council and staff and members of the public. So we have two parts to this presentation. The first part is typically presented by the outside audit firm who conducts the audit. And then I have a short presentation, just a couple slides, just to summarize internally from our staff and city perspective on the audit. So with that, I'm going to pass it on to Adam Guys. He is the audit partner was the audit partner on this engagement. And he's going to be going through the slides. And he is.
They're working on getting him up.
Okay.
So I don't know if you want to start with yours or just give him a couple minutes.
I'll give him a couple of minutes. And I know he's going to briefly mention this. This is the first year that this audit firm is doing the audit for the city. It is normal practice and recommended that we change auditors every 3 to 5 years to maintain that independence. Therefore, last time it was the Poon Group that did it for, I think they did 2 terms, 3-year terms, and then we did an RFP, so we brought Moss, Levy, and Hardsheim on. So they have 2 more years for the audit. So this was the first year that they conducted the audit.
Can we ask about the auditing firm, or is that not appropriate?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have an opinion on, is there a difference between this one and the previous one we used?
We did an RFP, so we got a good number. I'm going to say about 10 responses to the RFP, and we selected the firm based on knowledge, everything else that we had on in the RFP requirements, and one of them was knowledge of smaller municipalities, cities similar to ours. And so the auditors were on site. The last audit firm wasn't, so that was a big plus. So when they did all the audit testing, they came on site twice. Their firm is based, at least Adam is out of Santa Maria, so it's not that far. So they were able to come and bring their team to do the audit.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, he's here.
Okay.
Adam?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hi, so yeah, my name is Adam Geis. I was the partner in charge of the city's audit this year. We came out the city 2 separate times during the year to do our audit procedures. The first time we came out, we were concentrating on looking at the city's internal controls, reviewing the various processes for how payroll is run, how receipts are taken in, how checks are cut for disbursements and approved. And then the second time we came out, we did more of the traditional auditing work, where we get all the balances from the city's financial system, and then we go through all the backup documentation and find supporting information to support those balances. So what is here is the final financial statement audited report. The ACFR is how it's called now. And this is for the fiscal year ended June 30 of 2023. And so there was just a few things that I wanted to go through. I don't know if you have the PowerPoint in front of you.
We do.
Yes, we're on the
Okay.
first slide.
Okay. Again, I was the partner in charge from Moss, Lieby, and Hartzheim, and this was our first year of engagement with the city. And we were able to do all of our audit procedures, get all the backup from staff, and we were satisfied with all the numbers that are presented here in the report, and therefore we are issuing an unmodified audit opinion, which is the best type of audit opinion. One thing that I wanted to point out is there was a new GASB pronouncement. You know, every few years there seems to be some new pronouncement that has a large impact on the governmental financial statements. For the year ended June 30 of 2023, GASB 96 was the new one. Basically, what it is looking at long-term agreements for like computer software subscriptions. And instead of reporting those as just expenditures whenever the annual payments or monthly payments or whatever they are paid, it actually creates the liability that goes onto the city's books. And then that liability is lowered as the payments are made until the terms of the subscription are met. So this actually added about $1.6 million worth of liabilities to the books in this last fiscal year. And it was kind of similar treatment to what the GASB 87 did for city leases in the previous fiscal year. And then when we were out there doing all of our audit procedures, we reviewed all the internal controls, and it looked like all the internal controls were well set up, and that they were operating as intended. So we don't have any significant audit findings to report to the council today. The next page.
Can we get the door shut?
Did we skip a slide there?
I put it back. The pension liability and payments is up.
Okay. So one of the major changes this year that you'll notice in the city's liabilities section is the net pension liability. In the fiscal year ended 2022, the miscellaneous and safety plan added up to about $22.3 million worth of pension liability. For the fiscal year presented here, 2023, that number jumped by over $17.2 million to $39.6 million. What's happening here is the pension liability calculations are done looking at long-term costs of all of your current employees, all of your current retirees, and how those costs are going to affect the city's books in the future. And those calculations are highly sensitive to how CalPERS is doing with its investments. And in addition to that, CalPERS does everything on kind of a one-year lag. So when you're looking at the fiscal year 2023, that's based off of how CalPERS investments did as of June 30 of 2022, which at the time, the stock market was not doing very well. And that is the major reason why there was a large increase in the liability. I can report that in the next fiscal year, so in the fiscal year that's ending this next June, that liability will decrease some because the investments did fare quite a bit better in the year ended June 30th, 2023. So again, the city has control over some portions of the pension liability, but that number is highly subject to changes in CalPERS investments as well as assumptions at CalPERS. If you want to look at, so while the liability was almost 40 million, if you want to look at the amount that was actually paid to CalPERS for city employees, you can see that that number went from about 3.8 million to about 4.4 million. So it's a significant number, but it is just a fraction of that liability calculation. A few other items that I wanted to mention. The NG project was a large construction project that was completed during that fiscal year. And all of the work that was done on the project was done through the city's capital projects funds. And when the project was completed, a portion of the project itself, as well as some of the liabilities that were obtained in order to do the construction, were allocated out to the various enterprise funds, the water, the wastewater, and solid waste funds, in order to more accurately report how those funds use the NG project. So if you look at the capital asset notes and the long-term liability notes, you'll notice that there was some movement of the capital assets and movement of the related debt from the government activities to the business type activities. And that was what was happening there. Another thing that I wanted to point out, just in the accounting, the internal service funds were effectively closed by the end of the year. So they were reduced all the way down to zero net position as the city was restructuring its accounting system for implementation of the new citywide accounting system, and decided to move those internal service funds into the general fund. Any questions or anything to report? I just wanted to say that while we were out at the city, we were able to get everything that we wanted from the city, and I know it's a lot of work on city staff to maintain their normal duties while getting everything that we're asking them for. And I appreciate all of the hard work by city staff to keep things organized and get us all the information needed so that the audit could be completed.
Adam, I think there's the one last slide is the general fund balance. I just put it up. I think it skipped it.
Oh, okay. Okay. Going back to the general fund. So the general fund had a total ending fund balance of 47.7 million during the year. which was an increase of over 2 million from the prior year. Of the fund balance, though, there are a few different portions that are either committed, which is the reserves for fiscal policy of about 18.3 million. And what that means is that those monies were specifically set aside by council action into different reserves. 2.2 million was officially restricted, and that was mostly in the PARS trust fund. That money is sitting in the general fund, but is not available for use other than for the specific purpose. And then there is a large advance payable between the general fund and the water fund for 11.3 million, and that balance sits in non-spendable fund balance. So at the end of June 30, 2023, the unassigned fund balance was about 15.9 million of the total general fund balance.
All right, thank you so much. Does council have any questions for staff for the presentation? Councilmember Gama.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I forgot your name.
Adam.
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 Thank you. I apologize for that, Adam. Adam, did our unfunded position with the unfunded liability pension obligation go down or up?
Off the top of my head, I'm not sure. That number does have quite a large percentage interest rate assigned by CalPERS to it. You know, ideally it's going down over time, but it just depends on CalPERS calculations as they update them. And off the top of my head, I don't remember how that number changed from the prior year.
I think Lupe could probably answer, and I'm going to guess that it went up.
It went up, and it's mostly because, like Adam mentioned, is the interest rate. So when you look at 2022, we were using reports from the prior year when we had that really strong return. I think it's 21%. So that was the biggest factor impacting the pension liability.
Yeah, but I'm just trying to gauge over time, are we closing the gap, or is it just widening on us?
And part of the reason why I was saying I would guess, I was guessing it went up is we had that our unfunded pension liability specialist come present to council a couple months ago. And if you remember, they showed that chart, and it showed that for a few more years, our costs are going to be rising. And then I forgot the year, is it 2030 or so?
Somewhere in the 30, 32 when it kind of goes
when
the
it
other way.
plateaus and then starts to drop. And so we expect that, and I think it would be a surprise if it did drop in the next couple years. It's not unusual. It's kind of the situation a lot of cities are in, other than the few cities who are just ahead of the curve on fully funding their pensions, maybe not fully, but funding them to a high percentage. So it's not unusual. It's something we're aware of and we're looking at. We're going to try to keep addressing, but we expect it to go up for a few more years.
Councilmember Hernandez, do you have any questions?
Just one quick question. Thank you, Ms. Serra, for your presentation, and thank you, Adam. Was this the first time we've done an audit since we implemented the new financial management system?
Actually, the audit, it was still done in the legacy system. This will be the new one in 2024.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Thank you.
Councilmember Martinez?
Questions?
No? Okay, thank you. It looks like here that we have an unqualified clean audit opinion. So what are the different audit opinions? How do they range?
I can take that one. So this is an unmodified audit opinion. It used to be called unqualified. Why they changed the terminology, I'm not quite sure. But the other types of audit opinions, there's an adverse opinion. That means that the auditor looked at your books and knows that there is an inaccuracy that's being reported in the financial statements. Or a no opinion is where their auditor is unable to obtain enough information to support some of the balances that are presented in the financial statements. So the auditor basically cannot rely on some of the numbers in the statements And then the last type would be a qualified opinion where the auditor was able to obtain supporting documentation and agrees with the majority of the balances in the financial statements, except for something that's noted. Whereas the unmodified opinion means that the auditor was able to complete their work and the numbers presented are reliable.
So that means we got an A++?
Correct.
Were there any suggestions that you had, that you advised to staff to make things better, easier? I'm really unfamiliar with how audits work, but was there any helpful tips, suggestions that were given or anything like that that happened in this conversation, or was it just you primarily going through the books to look at everything?
No, it's a two-way process as we're going through, especially with the controls testing. As we go through, we're trying to figure out why the city's doing things in certain ways, and we're talking through that with staff. And a lot of minor recommendations are made at that point directly to staff. If there was anything that we deemed to be significant, then it would be reported in a letter to the city council. And as I mentioned earlier, there was no significant audit findings.
Great. Well, good job all around, staff and Adam. So no further questions from council, then are we moving on to Mrs. Cero's brief report?
Yes, thank you, Adam.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My presentation is brief, and I just want to continue basically where Adam, we left off at the end of fiscal year 2023. So it's a quick summary of what Adam just mentioned. We are happy that we received an unmodified opinion. It's a clean opinion. Again, the auditors were here twice, and finance staff and other staff in the city as well. So I want to thank all the departments work with the auditors to provide all the information that they needed. I think that's key in getting for them to understand and review all of what they need to review to do their work. In 2023, so I wanted to point this out, that's important, the city and council approved the general fund capital investment reserve policy. Even though that was approved in fiscal year 2024, we still hadn't officially closed the books, and we were able to transfer the initial funding into that reserve of $1.5 million. So that is represented in the 2023 financials because we were able to still do that in fiscal year 2023. And then the last point that I wanted to make is in regards to the unassigned fund balance that Adam pointed out. Part of the audited financials at the end of fiscal year 2023 was $15.8 million, and that's what's shown on the ACFR on the report. He did mention that we transfer some funds. So the one fund that was significant that we transferred that was always funded if there was a shortfall would be funded from general fund was the fleet and risk. And those are now part of the general fund. So they're separate divisions, so we still want to track them because they have their separate costs. But they were when we came and started migrating to the new Tyler system, it was easier from an accounting standpoint and simpler to just make a division under general fund. So that's what he was referring to that. Then we had some other funds, small ones. One that I can point out was the RDA bond proceeds, the redevelopment agency. If those loans, the obligations were satisfied in 2023, and we just had some small fund balance that we're gonna utilize restricted for capital projects of $260,000. And instead of just keeping that fund open, we brought that over to general fund. So with that said, it's about $1.1 million that's restricted. It's in that $15 million, but we know it's not general fund unrestricted. We're using it for specific purposes. And that's what I wanted to show here, kind of like a roll forward of what Adam mentioned. This first slide just shows the unassigned fund balance. In fiscal year 21-22, it was $16.7 million. Fiscal year 22-23, which is the audit period that we just finished, adjusted for that $1.1 million is $14.7 million. And then in 23-24, I'm so sorry, that should be 23-24, not 24-25. It's $6.5 million, and that's because there was an appropriation by Council for Bubbling Springs. So that's the significant drop into this fiscal year. And this kind of shows the same information just in a different format, but we started with the 14.7 million, and then the 4.8 was committed, has been committed for Bowling Springs. And then the 1.5 as well is going to be part of that reserve. And then there's other transfers, and there was other CIP in this year capital in '24 that's also being transferred, or the unassigned is being used to fund those projects. We transfer to the reserves every year, so we have committed reserves for stability, economic reserve, which is 6 months of operations, and every year we do a true-up, and so that's what I mean by that 1.9, that there's adjustments, so every year we adjust that, and we make that equal 6 months. So if we have to transfer from unassigned, we transfer that at that time. And right now, the estimated unassigned as of now is 6.5 million, and we'll be bringing that to council when we do the revised budget in 2 weeks. So we'll have that, and we'll have 425. Any questions?
Does council have any questions for Ms. Acero? Okay, seeing none?
Thank you.
Thank you. So we are going to move on to public comments. Are there any public comments regarding this item?
No, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Seeing no further comments or questions from council, this is a receive and file, so no action or vote is going to be taken. So we'll move on to the next item, which is city manager comments and reports. Thank you, Ms. Acero.
Thank you. I have a few things today. I'll try to keep them quick. First, we have a few happenings that we wanted to let people know about. First, and we'll be posting some things on social media in the next couple days on this. But 1 week from today, we have our first annual Memorial Day event at Hueneme Beach and at our Hueneme Pier at 8:30 in the morning. Everyone's invited to that event, and we'll be posting information on the program and what we're going to be doing. But we just wanted to let everybody know that is the first Memorial Day event 1 week from today at 8:30 in the morning at Hueneme Pier. And so put that on your calendar if you're interested in attending. A couple of items related to, we had some storm damage over at the recreation center and the community center and a couple of the classrooms there. And the good news is little by little, we're getting those buildings back reopened. The teen center has officially reopened and they are back on site using that facility. Our classrooms have reopened and those are back being used for programming. Currently, the last phase there is we're working on the office and the auditorium. And so those are in progress now, and we're hoping to make progress on the offices in the next a couple of weeks. And then the auditorium is going to take a little bit longer because it's just a larger space. So, but the rec classrooms and the teen center are back and open for business. And so last, and I should have said this earlier when we had some of our commenters here, but a couple of comments came in about the Community Benefit Fund, and we have set the next joint city port meeting for May 30th at, I believe it's 3:30 p.m. And so those, we put an agenda out and let people know, so we'll make sure that we get that posted. But that meeting is scheduled, so any of the people who had questions about that meeting could attend or get information from that meeting. We'll post some information on this too, but we just wanted to let people know Gold Coast Transit District did announce last week that effective July 7th, they will be updating their fare structures. And the biggest thing is it will increase the regular fare for Gold Coast buses from $1.50 to $2 for the regular adult base fare. The reduced rates all will increase accordingly since most of them are based on that regular rate. So we'll be posting information on that, and Gold Coast is posting information as well. So anybody who uses Gold Coast Transit should be aware that that's taking effect July 7th. And then last, just for next council meeting, it's a full agenda with some major items that we'll definitely want to make sure we have the time to work through. We're planning to bring our budget revise for the upcoming fiscal year, the CIP, capital improvement projects with that budget revise. And then also we're bringing back the council policy and procedures discussion that was requested a couple of meetings back. And so it'll be a full meeting. And then we actually were looking ahead and really the next 3 meetings into July, and then we have our recess. They're all pretty full. We have a lot of items that are coming back, and so we have about, I think it's 4 meetings left, and then August recess, and then we're back in September. So we're already seeing full agendas for almost the whole time up until the summer recess. So we'll be bringing those items back, but the next meeting, budget, capital improvement projects, and council policy and procedures. So,
Does council have questions?
Thank you.
Councilmember Gama?
Is the Community Benefit Fund meeting going to be here, and is it going to be televised?
Did we select a location?
We're working out those details with the port.
Yeah, because I don't know if I have to make a motion or make an agenda, but it's
Can't
probably
make a
too late.
motion today. Yeah.
Yeah. But I would hope that that would be the case. I think we need to be transparent with that, and being that some of the attitudes expressed in prior meetings, I think, need to be viewed by the public. So
I will say we are highly recommending that.
Yeah, I think we recommended that we do it here, and the other part is the port agreed the last time we were here that we offered to videotape these and make the video available, and they agreed to do that while we're here. So we've offered and recommended to use our site, but it hasn't been agreed to yet. So,
Councilmember Hernandez?
So I also thought that we decided on a practice of scheduling on the agenda, on our city council agenda, a discussion on what's going to the port committee, city port committee meeting. And this is tonight's the last opportunity to do that. It's not on the agenda.
We did
So
it
what
at
is
the
on the
last
agenda for
I can
the 30th?
I can explain. So we did have the council's already discussed the items on that
So
agenda.
there's nothing new beyond what we already discussed?
That we are aware of. We
Not
don't know
that-
what the port's.
Yeah, not that we're aware of at this time, but we haven't gotten the answers from the port of
Do we know what's on
Any
the
items?
agenda?
the Community Benefit Fund,
That's
which
it?
has come to the council.
Okay. Now, what about the Citizens Advisory Commission? I understand
Mhm.
there's going to be a meeting to discuss the Community Benefit Fund.
Mm-hmm.
Is
Correct.
that going to be before the 30th?
It will be on the 28th, I believe, is the date they're planning.
Okay, and the purpose of that discussion is,
So that's on the list of items approved by the council for the CAC, and actually assigned to the CAC is to annually review the allocations to the CBF.
okay, so they could possibly have recommendations that go to the May 30th meeting, or would they have to come to council first?
No, so at this point, council had the initial brainstorming session a couple weeks back. We had a joint Port City CBF meeting scheduled. The port came and said they had not had a chance to discuss it at all,
Right.
unlike we had discussed it. So they asked for more time, so we have now rescheduled this meeting, which will be that same item that we've already prepared for.
I see, okay.
And so, but as part of the process, the CAC can provide any input. So we're taking the brainstorming list to them, asking them for input, and then that would go to the joint committee.
Okay.
So
All right,
it's
got
a
it.
process.
All right, thank you.
Any further questions for City Manager Vega? Seeing none, we will move on. Oops, sorry about that. To councilmember reports and comments. Councilmember Gama.
Thank you, Mayor Perez. I just returned from the California CJPIA Insurance Authority. It was a really nice elected officials summit. Got to listen to a lot of council members from other jurisdictions having the same issues with mandated state requirements as related to housing. had a Beacon meeting this past Friday. We've reaffirmed our science committee. Dr. Patch is continuing to be the chair of that. We instituted a 3% CPI increase, and that's about it for that. We're still moving forward with our solicitation for projects moving forward and trying to work out how to make them all come to the benefit of the organization. We really, I think we really have fine-tuned the fact that each member of Beacon has different issues, different coastal issues, and the organization is working as a regional organization, but also working to support the issues of its member agencies. And our current need, as usual with every 2 years, is to work on the dredging allocation process, which is very, very complicated. And so we're still trying to bring clarity to that so that we don't have to go through this exercise every 2 years. But everybody's hands-on on that issue for us. One of the things that we did, we appointed Brian Brennan as a special projects advisor, and we're really looking at beach use and user data that's being collected through cell phones. It's really fascinating to really understand like who's coming to the beach and what are they doing. And cell phones are just an incredible tool to collect that data. So it's really fascinating to see how that's going on. A lot of conversation about sea level rise, sediment management, and how we all could support each other in that process, but also realize that we're all different. And that's kind of the strength of Beacon, is being able to cater to the individual needs of the member cities. And so we're looking for more grant opportunities. One thing that came up over my trip to Alaska, I met a graduate student working on kelp restoration projects, and that's a project that Beacon did a few years back and we're still interested in. And so I was able to talk with this person and get information, and hopefully we could get some collaboration between Dr. Patch and this particular individual is working under the tutelage of Dr. Patch's colleague at the University of Santa Cruz. And so kind of got a little excited about the prospect for bringing back a more aggressive and long planned kelp restoration project. And if you don't know, kelp produces more oxygen than trees, which is kind of mind-boggling. So, and here in this county, we lost many kelp forests during El Nino, and they haven't recovered yet. And so we're trying to help that process along. So, and that's it for now.
Thank you. Councilmember Hernandez?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I attended all my regular meetings. What was different was the Sand Summit. I sat in on that meeting. That presentation was done on the 9th. It was very well done, and we actually had Army Corps of Engineers this year, which we've not had in previous years. So it was really well attended. I think there was a lot of interest to hear Dr. Kiki Patch and to hear what some of the other jurisdictions are doing. So kudos to Beacon for putting that together for us. I also attended the BCOG meeting as an alternate, and a couple of things that came out of that were, well, one thing I wanted to highlight was the presentation by the Ventura County Behavioral Health Department on the CARE Act and Proposition 1. And for those of you who are following what's happening to our mental health system and to the changes at the state level, not to mention this governor's mid-revised budget indicating billions of dollars in a shortfall that we're going to be having to that we'll be feeling in the next years to come. The Proposition 1 is really, from what I took away, was it's not going to really help homeless situations, and that it's really redirecting resources into an area of helping people who are severely mentally ill, schizophrenia, other psychosis, and there's a smaller percentage of the homeless population who suffer from that, but a majority of the money is going to work in that area. So we're going to be seeing some definite changes in how mental health resources are allocated in this county, and I think we just need to keep advocating that we need mental health services for all. And while it's interesting that we're focusing on the most severe mentally ill, I don't know how far it's going to go in helping others, especially those who are homeless. So it'll be interesting to watch. The other meeting I attended was the Ventura County Regional Energy Alliance, and thank you, Mr. City Manager, for sending Jose to attend that. He did a good job participating, and I think he got some networking in there and met a few people, and we walked away with some good information. This was the Energy Champion meeting where it's the worker bees from each of the city departments who come and talk about what they're doing in the area of climate change, energy, and other areas of reducing GHG emissions. So one of the things I heard at that meeting through the Clean Power Alliance is that they're going to be allocating $250,000 to local jurisdictions who are participating for the putting together of a climate action plan. So I hope we can keep that on our radar, and when we officially join them, take advantage of that funding source. You know, I had to ask him twice, are you sure you said $250,000 for a climate action plan? Because I know we don't have money for that, but I think it's important we do develop one, so hopefully that opportunity will make its way to us soon. Other than that, there is a lot of legislation that's being considered right now. I have the packet that I'll leave in the council office for those of you who are interested in taking a look at it. And that concludes my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Martinez?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I also want to thank you for inviting me to the Boys and Girls Club breakfast.
Of course.
And then I'm excited. I believe we have a meeting for the art mural committee this week. Is it Wednesday?
Wednesday evening.
Okay. I'm also excited that the city announced the new scholarship opportunities for our youth. City Manager, can you remind us the deadline to apply for that?
I believe that one, because we have two things right now. We have that and the poster contest. So I believe that one's May 31st. That's open to high school seniors who reside in Port Hueneme. And then we're also doing the
art contest.
That's the scholarship. And then we're doing the Beach Fest art contest, which is, I think, open till June 7th.
Okay.
And like the next week. And that one's open to more age groups. So information on both of those are on our website and Facebook pages.
Thank you. And regarding the Sister City Committee, I'm happy to announce that it sounds like the new city attorney's taking that challenge and getting going with creating the nonprofit. Our next meeting's on June 5th. And also I got a call last week from the new Sister City president from Puerto Vallarta, and they're thinking about visiting on August 3rd. So being here in Hueneme around that time. So that's all I have for today. Thank you.
Thank you. So yes, the Boys and Girls Club had their annual breakfast, which is a big success, and we had Jackie Joyner Kersey was our keynote speaker. We try to find somebody who grew up in the Boys and Girls Club and then made an impact in their lives, and they're able to come and to testify as to how that affected them and where they are now. And her story was great to hear. The Boys and Girls Club Port Hueneme is getting ready to, I think we're doing an RFP for construction, but we're not ready to do a huge overhaul inside and out for that building. It was a long time coming. All the fundraising has been doing so much good to allocate to that building. It's been, how long have we had that? Anybody know how long we've had that building for Boys and Girls Club? 15, 10?
Over 20 years?
Yeah, I think so. So it's due. It needs to be overhauled completely. So I'm excited about that. So our city manager and our chief of police came up with a wellness event for our city, which is a team run concept. And if each individual city member wants to join us for a run that we're doing around the city, they send out an all hands invite. And this weekend on Sunday, we had the Seaside Marathon. So I'd like to congratulate a few city employees who participated. We have Dennis Martinez, who participated in the 10K. So congratulations on that. We have James Vega and wife, who participated in the 10K as well. There's Michelle Gutierrez, her husband, and I believe her child. They participated in the 5K. Jocelyn Lopez, and I believe her daughter, please correct me if I'm wrong, participated in the 5K. We have Gerardo Moreno, and he pushed a stroller and had a young child with him doing the 5K as well. And then Sergeant Perez and wife, he did the half marathon, and I did the 5K. So I want to congratulate all the city employees who came out and participated in that. And please, it's open to council as well. So let us know if you want to be part of Team Run Wainimi. You can walk. You don't have to run.
I didn't hear about this one this weekend.
Oh.
Was that part of the team?
Mhm.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's 2 more races in Ventura coming up in July and I believe September. And then maybe some in between that I'm sure we'll be sending out invites if anybody wants to get registered and join our team. So congratulations to all staff who participated in that.
Good job.
That's all I have. So we'll move on to requests for future agenda items. Councilmember Gama. Councilmember Hernandez. Councilmember Martinez. Seeing none, we will move on to adjournment. I'd like to adjourn this meeting at 8:56. The regular next meeting is scheduled for Monday, June 3rd, 2024 at 6:30 p.m. The time is 8:56 and we are adjourned.
We have a water agency meeting now?